The SBR would be massive. If the SBR happens, the Bitcoin price is going to $1 million next year, literally. Sky is the fucking limit.
To retire on Bitcoin, like what do you think is that number?
If you're hearing these stacking goals and you're like, fuck, I missed it. I missed 21. I missed 615. I missed one. Yeah, you're right. You did miss it. But you can still do the dollar cost averaging thing and just put away $10, $20 a day over long periods of time, and the CAGR rate is still going to end up with you being worth millions of dollars. If we get the game theory of nation states trying to outstack each other in a sort of sats race, like a Cold War, then the sky is the limit in terms of price. Like 50 million is just, could be 50 million, could be tens of trillions of dollars, you know? If the dollar starts to lose all meaning, then the price is infinite. So you might think you're trading it at 200K and it goes to $1 million and you lost out on 800,000 and it never goes back to 200K. It crashes out and falls to 300K, right? And you're down. Like, that's going to be painful as fuck if you were trying to trade it to get more Bitcoin. If we get the SBR, I would put the odds of a super cycle at like 60%, maybe 70%. If we don't get an SBR, I would put the odds at like 5 to 10%. So the SBR, the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, is massive. It's like we have a bonfire, like a small campfire going on now, and it would be as if somebody, like equivalent to this bull market, it would be as if somebody fucking dropped napalm from a helicopter on top of our fucking campfire. Like, that's what it is.
Bing bong. I am back with another edition of the State of Bitcoin podcast, where I've got the man, the myth, the legend, American Hodl in the house. But before we get into it, American Hodl, you tweeted out that in 2015, you told everybody you knew that Bitcoin was going to 100K. We're creeping up on it now. But now you're saying in 2024, you're saying Bitcoin is going to $50 million a coin. So what do you think are going to be some of the main catalysts, and why did you come up with this $50 million a coin mark?
Well, I should have said 100 million, right? I only said 50 because it's the same multiple. It's 500x between 200 and 100,000. So that would be the same multiple between 100,000 and 50 million. So that's why I said 50 million, because my track record is only good for 500x. So I was like, listen, I told you about the last 500x. I'm telling you about the next 500x. There's a kicker of, there's a little more on top of that. There's a doubling on top of that after that. But yeah, I think if you look at the landscape that we're in now, I mean, we're at nation state level stacking now, right? Like, we kind of have leapfrogged Wall Street, or it's like Wall Street and corporate America happened around the same time as nation state adoption. And so, yeah, I mean, this thing has orders of magnitudes by which it moves. In the beginning, it was like, just a couple of libertarian millionaires were able to pump the price of Bitcoin. And then, it moved up. You had to get billionaires involved, and you had to get institutions involved and corporates involved and Wall Street involved. And now we're at the nation state level, and the level after that is central bank, right? And so there's only 2 more levels left, and we're at the second to last one. So yeah, in my opinion, man, it's things are hyper bullish. And if we get the game theory of nation states trying to outstack each other in a sort of sats race, like a Cold War, then the sky is the limit in terms of price. Like 50 million is just, could be 50 million, could be tens of trillions of dollars. If the dollar starts to lose all meaning, then the price is infinite at some point.
Yeah, and I mean, I definitely agree with that. But you brought up Wall Street and kind of the aspect of that. Now, we've recently had the options market, kind of the derivatives market, open up. That's the biggest market there is. I mean, it's some estimates up to like $1 quadrillion worth of just this derivative market. So
Right.
do you carry, that as much of weight as almost like the ETF products in the US seemingly going live here earlier this year?
I mean, I think that the MSTR story is indicative of what's happening as Bitcoin and TradFi meet each other and begin to merge, and the opportunities that are there. Like, I think there are so many unknowns for us as Bitcoiners as to what that world looks like. Like, the MSTR thing is like not really a story about retail traders. It's really a story about, the convertible bond market and like who the fuck knows what the convertible bond market is thinking or doing, or how it operates? Like, I certainly don't. So I've been learning about it the last few weeks, and I expect that there are many more things like that we're going to find along the way. And yeah, certainly the derivatives market is a big part of that as well. But there's this thing where people say that TradFi is co-opting Bitcoin, and I think it couldn't be further from the truth. I think Bitcoin is a Trojan horse that's going into the system and basically not co-opting, but fixing TradFi, like providing a real rate of return in TradFi and like correct economic calculation to TradFi. So I think we're watching that hybridization. Like, there's a lot of Bitcoiners that think that the dollar is just going to collapse overnight and then the whole world will just be denominated in Bitcoin. And that was a potential for that to happen, but I don't think that's the world we actually live in. I think we live in the world in which there's a slow transition. And in a slow transition state, there's this hybridization where there's like half fiat, half Bitcoin system that sort of merges with each other. And over time, the Bitcoin eats the fiat, is what most of us believe.
Yeah, so you made an interesting comment there. Bitcoin fixing the traditional financial system. Let's dive into that a little bit more. So what do you mean by that? Do you think like,
Okay.
Traditionally the stock market hasn't necessarily given a real return and it's all been kind of like inflated and manipulated in a way to look like it is? Yeah, dive into that a little bit
Yeah,
more.
certainly, I think that equities have provided a real rate of return, but if you do look at inflation, I don't think you're performing as well as you think you are. So there's money illusion there. And then the other thing is equities have become like a default store of value for the fiat system. Like, basically, like when we went on the fiat standard in 1971, when Nixon closed the gold window, we had gold as the default store of value. Then we had bonds as the default store of value. And now we have equities as the default store of value. And I think what's happening is that Bitcoin is taking the place of equities as the default store of value. And so we're moving into this world where what you have on your balance sheet is much more meaningful actually than your cash flows. And that's, again, back to the MicroStrategy thing. That's part of that story, is like net asset value is much more important than the price to earnings ratio. So yeah, I think that you can think of it. Here's a mental model you can use, is that you can think of dollars as creating distortions as they bounce around the global economy. And you can think of Bitcoin as trailing those dollars and cleaning those distortions, is how I tend to think about it.
Okay, so then it's going to get more as, like actually being a cash flowing business, opposed to what we've seen a lot lately, which is, the zombie companies, the Amazons of the world, where they basically just, are venture capital funded for a while. And then they came up with AWS and magically now they make money. Do you think that there's going to be more of a, I guess, like a stress and kind of like revolutionizing the business where, the Warren Buffetts of the world who made the name on, the value investing, that those principles are going to, I guess, in a sense, start to come back because, value has been kind of dead, I guess, if you look at it from like, an equity standpoint in investing in equities,
Mhm.
right?
I've personally, I've always thought of Bitcoin as a value play, always. And I was like a Ben Graham, Warren Buffett guy. I used to listen to Preston Pish's podcast back when it wasn't back before he was just a crazy Bitcoiner, and now everything's crazy Bitcoin stuff. But I used to listen to his pod because it was like the Value Investors podcast, and at that time, Preston as the host and me as a listener, it felt like everyone was banging their head against the wall trying to figure out, like, why isn't value work? It should be working, and it's not. And I think we had to, like, Bill Miller has talked about this, who's a prolific value investor with like sort of a different lens on it, is that you have to find, in the world we live in today with these, sort of stimulative monetary policies, inflationary monetary policies, helicopter money, QE, et cetera. You have to find new ways to think about value. And also, we're living in an information economy. So when Ben Graham wrote, his books, and when they wrote like Random Walk Down Wall Street, um, we were living in a world that was much more uh, information scarce. And now we have an abundance of information. It's very easy to find the information. So that means the market is better at pricing information, right? Which also makes value harder. Value is really about information asymmetry. And so where can you find information asymmetries? There weren't many places to do it in the early, 2000s and 2010s until Bitcoin appeared. And then it was like, oh shit, this is a big this is a big deal information asymmetry. And I think what's interesting is we still have our edge in that sense of the people that understand Bitcoin versus the people that don't. So if you have a fiat operating system, you're thinking in dollars rather than thinking in Bitcoin terms, I think we've seen that you underperform Bitcoiners. So like if you're going to search for yield, for instance, and you're going to try and do so to achieve more Bitcoin, it's not an impossible thing to do. It's just a very hard thing to do. I think there was this thing where, in DeFi, the DeFi summer shit that happened, that we all were making fun of yield because the DeFi yield was basically Ponzi, like it was Ponzi-nomics. And, that yield was fake. And that, like, there was a good reason to make fun of that yield. In general, I think Bitcoin yield is something that is possible. It's just extremely difficult. So it's not impossible. It's just extremely difficult. And if you're going to try and go out and invest in order to create, yield, Bitcoin yield in this market, you need to have the correct, framework by which to deal with it. Like I was talking with somebody just recently about the MSTR MNAV, and they were saying that like the MNAV doesn't matter, and I think over a long time scale it doesn't matter, but like in the short time frame, you do need to pay attention to it, because if you're thinking and denominating in Bitcoin, you want to make sure that you're not going to get contracted on the Bitcoin denomination. So like if you're buying MSTR to 2x premium when you could have just bought Bitcoin, and the MSTR contracts and now you're at a 1x, right? Then you're fucked. You did a bad job as an investor. But if it expands, the premium expands to like 5x, you did a killer job. So your job as an investor is to figure out like which one of those two scenarios is likely to occur. And the people, even in like shitcoin land, like the people that were trading shitcoins the last 10 years, the shitcoiners who were thinking in Bitcoin terms massively outperformed the shitcoiners that were thinking in dollar terms. So if you go out and look at the chart, like the XRP is pumping again, right? Like the insanity is back. If you look at the XRP chart, everybody's excited. The XRP holders are excited that it's up to like $2.50 or $3 or something. But in Bitcoin terms, it's down horrendously. And in dollar terms, it hasn't even recaptured its 2017 high. So yeah, it's all about having the correct lens by which to do economic calculation. And I think that the world is going to be very harsh on people who don't have the correct lens. If you're still thinking with an outdated operating system, you're going to get your lunch eaten for you. It's going to be like when Europeans were trading with glass beads in order to steal African countries. It's not going to be good.
Well, then, what do you think of MSTR and kind of the alpha that is there on that? Do you think like it's potential that people have missed the boat? I mean, Michael Saylor announced this morning, we're recording this on December 2nd, that they bought more Bitcoin, and it seems like it's a weekly occurrence at this point. So how are you looking at that compared to just holding Bitcoin?
So yeah, here's the way I think about it, which is I do own MSTR. I own both. I have owned MSTR since basically Michael Saylor announced, and I made that investment more or less symbolically as a Bitcoin investment. And also there was a practical reason, which was it was in my wife's 401k, which I managed for her, and they wouldn't let her have access to GBTC. So there was no way to get Bitcoin exposure in the account, and the only way to get Bitcoin exposure was MSTR. That's also still a popular reason to buy MSTR, is because of regulatory arbitrage around the world. Because even though we have the ETFs here in America, the Bitcoin ETFs, there are still many countries around the world that don't have easy access to these ETF products, especially in certain tax advantaged accounts. And so there's regulatory arb there, and that's why that's one of the reasons why people buy MSTR. For me, it's like, if you ask me, should you sell raw Bitcoin, spot Bitcoin, cold storage that you keep in cold storage in order to buy MSTR? I think the answer is very clearly hell no. Absolutely not, under no circumstances. But if you have stuck fiat in a retirement account and you want to buy MSTR or the ETFs, I think either one of those is a perfectly fine and rational thing to do. And I think that the MSTR story is kind of just getting started, because we're finding out that there is this intersection between TradFi Bitcoin that's highly lucrative for the people who are in Saylor's position or Saylor-like positions, that are able to sort of provide the products and exposure that these capital structures want. And so simple advice would be, personally, I wouldn't go over like a 10 or 20% allocation to MSTR versus spot Bitcoin. I think that's like way too far out on the risk curve. And then I also wouldn't own MSTR outside of retirement accounts. I would own them inside tax advantage accounts like a Roth. And if you're right, you're going to make a killing. And if you're wrong, like, it's only 10% of your total net worth, and the rest should be in cold storage Bitcoin that you keep, distributed in a sovereign multi-sig fashion. So that's my personal investment philosophy. You can do whatever you want though.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, not financial advice, right? But it is
Buying Bitcoin is financial advice. That is financial advice. Buy Bitcoin. This is financial advice. Okay.
All right, I love it. I love it. Well, what do you think of, Saylor's impact just on the business world? Like, we talked about the ETFs a little bit. We'll dive into the nation states in a second, but he just had this recent presentation to the Microsoft shareholders. They only gave him 3 minutes, but he went through like 58 slides or something crazy in this 3-minute time period to kind of try to convince shareholders that Microsoft, obviously like an absolute giant, one of the biggest companies in the world, to hold Bitcoin on their ETF. Do you think that part of the game theory has even gotten close to playing out yet? Or do you think that's still another, I guess, like cog that we need to knock down?
Are you looking for the best way to store your seed phrase? Well, I've got it for you. It's Stampseed. They've got the #1 punch place where you can order a full-on package where they've got every single thing. They've got all the letters. You could just get it in there. And they've got this sick hammer, which they've engineered to make it so easy for you to punch in that titanium steel plate and store your seed phrase in the most secure way possible. So go ahead and get your Bitcoin off of these exchanges and use promo code Green Candle for 15% off. They're helping power the show. They've got the Bitcoin logo. You can punch it into your seed phrase as well. If you could see it here, they've got a lot of cool stuff. And now I'm helping empower you to get your Bitcoin off an exchange utilizing Stampseed and storing your seed phrase in the most secure way possible. Now get to it. All right, back to the.
I think the people above Saylor are, most of them have completely different business models than Saylor does. So I don't think we're going to see them run MicroStrategy style playbooks. Will there be some level of treasury exposure? Yeah, some level, probably like 1 to 5%, pretty low for most of them. Like the Apples, the Microsofts, the Saudi Aramcos, like the Exxons, like all the people at the top, they'll have a small treasury allocation. I think underneath that, you're going to see a lot of MSTR copycats because it seems that the demand from the bond market is near infinite for these type of products, and Saylor is nowhere close to being able to satiate the demand on his own. So you're starting to see even Bitcoin miners like Mara begin to enter the fray and offer these types of notes. And I think you're going to see more of that as we go forward from smaller companies. Like Semler Scientific is a perfect example of that. Genesis, MetaPlanet, and there's probably going to be 100 more at some point soon. So yeah, this is going to be a popular trade on Wall Street over the next, 5 years, 10 years. And companies that get it are going to do very well, and companies that don't are going to be left behind. If you're Apple Computer and everybody buys your fucking $1,200 iPhone every year, no matter what, even though like they suck, and like, I bought the newest one and it like the AI doesn't work on it, the camera's slightly better, the battery's slightly better, the screen is slightly better, and that's it. And like for some reason we're all willing to pay $1,200 for that. That's a great business model for Apple. So I don't think they have as much concern in the near term. But over the medium to long term, you're going to have to figure it out or you're going to get destroyed.
Well, and with that on Apple, I'm curious to see, what you think of the potential of them, integrating, or do you think that that's a potential next step for us moving towards more of like the peer-to-peer transactions where, we can essentially almost have like an Apple Pay where, you just got to tap your phone and transact Bitcoin. Do you think that that's coming in the future, like companies like an Apple, Microsoft, or something like that embracing it?
I think everybody has the wrong mental model here about medium of exchange. Like a couple things here is like there's an order of operations to Bitcoin in my view, which is store value, medium of exchange, and then unit of account at the end. And so I believe store value comes first. I believe medium of exchange comes second. That's number one. So like, I don't think many people want to exchange their Bitcoin for goods and services in a world in which they believe Bitcoin is going up 500 to 1,000x, right? Like, do you really want to spend something today that will 1,000x in the future? Every $10 you spend is $10,000 in the future. Do you really want to spend that? Like, I don't know. That's tough, right? And then the other thing is, it's not a technological hurdle that prevents us from widespread medium of exchange. It's a regulatory and political hurdle. So it's the tax treatment of Bitcoin that makes it cumbersome in order to use in America and in developed nations as a medium of exchange. In El Salvador, there's no such tax treatment. So politically, smaller nations like El Salvador have already cleared the way. And there is some promising developments with, like, Trump being in office, that we could see some kinds of things happen. I mean, there's like a rumor that Trump is going to get rid of cap gains on American-made cryptocurrencies, which I don't even know what the fuck that means. That's the reason XRP is pumping, which is bullshit in my opinion. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think we're going to get rid of cap gains within the Trump administration over the next 4 years on Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrencies. If I'm wrong, I'd be happy to be wrong. That would be great. I don't think I am, though. And so, yeah, it's a regulatory issue. It's not a technological issue. And so we wouldn't need a tech company like Apple to, like, put it into the hands of millions of Americans. It doesn't matter. It's about tax treatment. We already have good Bitcoin tech that functions today. There's a lot of like hand wringing about it, but it's very good. It's very easy to send Bitcoin transactions, Bitcoin payments. Like, if you've never done so, I suggest you do so. Like, there are a lot of new TradFi Bitcoiners who are here, who are like sort of on the MSTR side and whatever. And it's like, that's great. I'm happy you're here. Also, you need to get a hardware wallet and start sending transactions and figure out how to use this thing. Run it. You need to run a node. Otherwise, you haven't diligenced your investment, right? So like, it's not that hard. It's not that scary. You can get started today. Just fucking get yourself a hardware wallet and start making transactions.
Yeah, so you brought up Trump. What do you think his impact would be on, or the impact of, the United States building the strategic reserve? How much weight are you carrying into that? And yeah, that game theory aspect of it starting to play out.
So the SBR, the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, is massive. It's like we have a bonfire, like a small campfire going on now, and it would be as if somebody like equivalent to this bull market, it would be as if somebody fucking dropped napalm from a helicopter on top of our fucking campfire. Like, that's what it is. The SBR would be massive. If the SBR happens, the Bitcoin price is going to $1 million next year. Literally. Sky is the fucking limit, right? I think there's a lot of reason to be hopeful about the SBR. I think if it happens, it is going to happen sooner rather than later. And it will be because of nation state FOMO. So the rumor right now is that someone in the Gulf, UAE is the rumor that's going around, is going to announce that they have over 100,000 Bitcoin. And I think that's going to cause some serious panic in Washington, and because of the petrodollar standard. And people are going to realize that they need to get on board or get left behind. And hopefully that pushes the SBR through. And if the SBR does go through, then America is going to be in an incredibly advantageous position over the next 100 years. Michael Saylor analogized this to the Alaska Purchase, the Louisiana Purchase, et cetera. And those, I completely agree, which is like, you got to move further west constantly. That's the story of humanity. And the furthest west we can go right now is cyberspace. And that means Bitcoin in terms of like owning a piece of cyberspace. After cyberspace, it's probably space, like actually going out and owning planets. But for now, we're kind of stuck in this in-between state between the end of the Western world when we reach California and going to Mars. And so the middle ground there is cyber. And yeah, we want to own that as Americans. So SBR, massive deal. Trump's win in general, massive deal, because we've been under the boot of the Biden administration, the corrupt and awful Biden administration. Let's not mince words. For the last 4 years. And, we came together to help elect Donald Trump, the Bitcoiners and the crypto guys, who I hate, but they helped. It was a team effort. So, I mean, things are bullish, man. Like, things are super bullish right now. And the best thing possible is just that Trump is going to leave us alone. Even better than that would be doing the SBR, but just being left alone is enough. Like, we just leave us the fuck alone. Government is not the answer to the problem. Government is the problem. Ronald Reagan said that, and he was right. And he did a lot of things that were shitty because he was part of the government, because the government's the problem, you know?
Yeah. So do you think it has to be like a country like the UAE? Because we've had, Swiss lawmakers coming out. We've had, Brazil, potentially China, Canada. Like, how big of a nation is it going to take, or, to kind of, I guess, like push it over the edge where you think it's going to be an arms race? Do you think size matters, or do you think, we're the girls that have been telling us that our entire lives have been telling the truth?
I think that number one, size does matter. Okay, if she told you it doesn't, King, I'm sorry, she lied to you. Number two is that I think the UAE, I think the Gulf broadly as a region is extremely geopolitically important because of the petrodollar, and that is the seat of a lot of America's power, is our ability to maintain those relationships. And if Bitcoin is seen or perceived to be a threat to that relationship, then I think it creates some serious incentives to start stacking. If if an ally does it, like if France or Germany does it, then it's or England, it's not as big a deal as if an enemy does it, because when an enemy does it, you start to realize you could end up on the wrong foot here and be in a world in which you're completely taken off guard by an enemy like China or Russia. And so I think that I would be looking for what the Gulf does in terms of geopolitical import, and I would also be looking for what China and Russia, our two largest enemies or adversaries. I would be looking for what they do as well. I think those are the most consequential nation state, players in the game. And like Germany, Australia, China, France, or sorry, Germany, Australia, France, Russia, etc. Most of the G7, I don't think are as meaningful. I think they're going to follow in our footsteps.
Do you think that there's a possibility that some country like that you've named has already started stacking, mining, something along those lines? Because there's been a lot of the tinfoil hat theories, but nothing has necessarily come out just yet. So do you think that it is a possibility that, a country like that has already either started mining, buying Bitcoin, or something along those lines, and we just, it's another kingdom of Bhutan, but we just find out about it later on down the road?
I don't have any special information here other than the Gulf thing, which I think is likely to happen. I think China and Russia kind of don't know how to deal with it. I think Russia has been, necessity is the mother of invention. And recently, because of the Ukraine conflict, Russia has had more reason to be interested in Bitcoin and interested in mining. I had a friend who had a Bitcoin mine in Russia when the war broke out. And he called me up and he was like, I'm so fucked. And I was like, I know you're so fucked because they're going to nationalize your mine. And then the next day they nationalized his mine. And I was like, yeah, of course. How could it go any other way? And so I think China is interesting because China clearly views Bitcoin as an American invention. And I think they're probably right. Now, does that mean that the U.S. government was behind it, or a private American citizen? Like, who is Satoshi? Was it the U.S. government? Was it a private American citizen? Was it a British person, a Canadian? Was it Peter Todd? Was it Adam? I don't know. Nobody knows. But certainly, Bitcoin is American in terms of ethos and in terms of principle. And I think it goes against sort of the Chinese systems of governance. But the Chinese are not stupid, and they realize that they're going to have a significant portion of Bitcoin in order to maintain and project power into the future, then that's what they're going to do, right? So like, it'll be interesting to watch the game theory play out. We basically, nation state level stacking, if you want the appropriate mental model, is a prisoner's dilemma. And in a prisoner's dilemma, the game theoretical approach to the optimal strategy is to go first. So you want to go first, and you want to go, with appropriate size. And that's why I think the strategic Bitcoin reserve is very important for America, because if America is the first one to get their hands on a couple million Bitcoin, then it's basically game, set, match. Everyone else is going to be trailing us from then on.
Okay, so you've discovered Bitcoin and are on the path to financial self-sovereignty. But simply holding Bitcoin is not enough. You need to make sure that it's scored properly and you are in 100% control over all your assets. So sharing your keys with third parties and taking on that counterparty risk is not the answer. The answer is pure and simple. It's uncompromising self-custody, and there's no better way to do it than the Bitcoin way. They've got over 25 years of cybersecurity experience, and their team of experts can help you properly self-custody your Bitcoin, secure your digital life, configure your privacy phones, and even establish a Plan B residency if you're looking to do so. So I'm going to help you guys out here and give you a free consultation if you take the first step and visit thebitcoinway.com/green candle, and you can check out the boys at the Bitcoin Way and see how they can help you become self-sovereign.
Well, yeah, I mean, I do think it's interesting. We've seen a lot of this, kind of play out post Trump announcing the potential for a strategic Bitcoin reserve. I mean, even China, recently declared crypto, and including Bitcoin, obviously, but as personal property, which, initially they were kind of trying to ban it and go in China's. So do you think there's a lot of other nations as well kind of flipping the script on Bitcoin? Do you think that is in response to the strategic Bitcoin reserve announcement and, what they're worrying about here, the prisoner's dilemma, where, because the US has so much influence, they're going to start to flip the script on Bitcoin and follow the US's lead before it's too late?
I think that Michael Saylor has talked about how our sovereign wealth funds have been buying MicroStrategy stock ahead of a potential strategic Bitcoin reserve in America. So that probably means like Norway and Sweden when he says sovereign wealth funds have been doing that, or it could also mean sovereign wealth funds out of the Gulf. But it's interesting. It's a tell, right, in terms of the nation state level games that are being played here. I think that China, Russia, America, the G7, everyone knows that there's going to be a monetary reset at some point. That's obvious, right? And what is going to be determinant of your place in the world after that monetary reset is how much hard currency, hard assets, sound money are you bringing to the table? And that's why China and Russia have been stockpiling gold. That's why America has never divested itself of its gold or Europe's gold, which we still hold a shitload of in Fort Knox. And so for a long time, the thinking was that the monetary reset was going to be priced in gold, and the amount of gold you held was going to determine the size of your seat at the table, right? I think the new thinking is that Bitcoin is going to leapfrog gold, and the amount of Bitcoin that you hold is going to determine your place at the table. That's a big idea. I know I'm not sure that if everybody understands it yet. I understand it pretty deeply because I've been thinking about it for 10 years. But Bitcoin's going to demonetize gold. We as Bitcoiners know that. It's only a matter of time. And when it does, the nation state with the most Bitcoin is going to be the biggest player at the table in the event of a monetary reset. So that's a big deal, right? I think it's imperative that American Bitcoiners get this through to the politicians and the people, the key decision makers here. And as far as China and Russia are concerned, I don't live there, so I don't give a fuck what they do. I hope they get it wrong, actually.
I love it. I love it, man. That's why you're American Hodl, right? But you had a great presentation not too long ago about the Bitcoin Mafia. I can't recall
Oh, yeah.
where I saw it, but do you think that, one, like kind of just briefly run through that theory? Because if I recall correctly, it was more on like a personal level where, more, Bitcoiners are going to start to own a lot of properties, the biggest businesses and everything like that. But do you think that theory, in a sense, would, kind of, as you're describing it, almost expand to the nation state level as well?
Yeah. I think the Bitcoin Mafia, just to put it simply, it was a presentation I gave at BitBlock Boom in 2021, maybe during COVID times, somewhere around there, 2020, 2021. And basically the premise here is that the name comes from the PayPal Mafia, which was that the PayPal Mafia were, this collection of guys like Thiel and Elon and Hoffman and Levchin, who all went on to do seriously important things in the world. And the idea is that Bitcoiners, people who got to Bitcoin early and have massive amounts of capital, will be able to use those tranches of capital, those hordes, in order to do significant and meaningful and important things in the world. Right now, that's on a multi-generational timescale. So as a capital allocator, I think it's perfectly reasonable to punt to the next generation, to basically spend time with your children, raise them effectively, with the right values, and then give them the opportunity to allocate capital in the future, because maybe you just don't see anything on the board that is worthy of your Bitcoin. Maybe there are things in the near term that are worthy of your Bitcoin. But I think, to expand out on the thesis more broadly, is that it's really about space colonization. Not to get too heady here, but like, once, cyberspace is the bridge between the end of the Western world and the beginning of the intergalactic empire. Okay. And to some degree, it's like Rome collapsed into and became a church. England collapsed and became a bank. America collapsed and became the internet. The internet collapses and becomes Bitcoin. Bitcoin collapses and becomes an intergalactic space travel corporation. Okay. So like, I think when I think of Bitcoin capital, I think of Bitcoin as something that can last for 1,000 years, 1,000 years plus, multiple thousands of years, 5,000 years, 10,000 years. And when I think in those terms, I think, what are the projects that humanity needs over the next several thousand years? And those things look to me like, the terraformation of Mars, space elevator, Dyson sphere, things that move us up the Kardashev scale. And so I think that as Bitcoin capital allocators, listen, like, we're just some guys who found ourselves on, at the changeover, like at the most important point in human history from a financial standpoint. And I think we have a sort of sacred duty not to fuck that up. And so most members of the Bitcoin Mafia have not even been born yet. They're going to be the inheritors, of this wealth, and they're going to be the ones who are able. Oh shit! Knock my computer off. They're going to be the ones who are able to do, these types of long-term capital accumulation projects. There's this idea that I think Nick Carter put out, which I love, of Bitcoin being a cathedral. And if you don't know, like, cathedrals in Europe used to be built over multiple generations, and your great grandfather would start on the stone at the foundation, and you would finish the stone at the top, right? Or you'd put the crucifix at the top, and then it would be complete, and it would take multiple generations to get done. Bitcoin's a multi-generational project, and we need to use it for the betterment. We need to use Bitcoin wealth for the betterment of humanity, not just for Lamborghinis and Rolexes and shit. Like, if you want a Lambo and a Rolex, that's cool. Ultimately, in Bitcoin terms, they're going to be super cheap, right? But the actual things we can do with Bitcoin are, space elevator, Dyson sphere, vacuum balloon, like the cool shit that moves humanity forward. That's the thing that I'm most interested in.
Well, how long do you think we are away from getting to something along those lines? And then on the flip side of things, do you think the strategic Bitcoin reserve would almost like prolong the American dominance here, where it seems almost inevitable, where you see the meme of all these empires somewhat collapse and then Bitcoin rising up. Do you think the strategic Bitcoin reserve would help, I guess, like keep the American dominance and in turn strengthen the dollar here for at least a certain period of time?
Yeah, America is a 1,000-year empire. It's obvious. When I look out at the board, I don't see anybody who's capable of competing with America. The BRICS nations are shit. Europe is our vassal state. They're our bitch. They do what the fuck they're told. Like, Africa is in collapse. Like, I don't know India is a dirty garbage dump. Like, who is gonna fucking replace America? Like, I don't see anybody on the board who's capable of doing so. So yeah, I think the American empire will go on for 1,000 years. We're finally at the place now where we're actually calling it an empire. We never used to do that. So like, we're all aware of what it actually is, what this structure is. And I think that the point of America truly is, to get us to space. That's the point. That's the point of the American ethos, American capital structures, American culture, American principles, defending those things, getting those things correct. We've gone astray for the last like 50 years or so since we've been on the fiat standard. So there's a lot of correction that needs to take place. I mean, basically, we have to undo like 100 years of like progress, right? Like, ever since even before we were off the fiat standard, like the creation of the Federal Reserve, like, there are so many things to be undone that have led us astray in our society. And I think if we can begin to undo those things, we can begin to get the culture right and the science right. And if we can get the culture and the science right, we can start doing the things, we can start creating and inventing the things that we need in order to go to space, and preserve human consciousness into the future. Like, these are very important, lofty ideals. And when you join the Bitcoin story, that's what you're actually signing up for. You're not signing up for moon Lambo. You know, you're signing up for dynastic wealth and the preservation of human consciousness across the cosmos.
So do you think that that's coming soon then, where we start to, I guess, like colonize space, and then, yeah, is like Elon a huge catalyst for everything that you see going forward? Because, you know, he was a part of that PayPal mafia in a sense, but
Yeah.
he's kind of like teetering on the edge of the Bitcoin mafia, I'd say. So yeah, what's your view on like his kind of influence with all of this here going forward?
Elon has stated that he is only interested in accumulating capital and resources so that he can get humanity to occupy Mars and go to space. And I believe he's sincere in that belief. I don't think he understands Bitcoin enough, but I think when he does fully grok Bitcoin, he is going, which is ironic because the name of his AI is called Grok. I think when he does fully grok Bitcoin, he is going to realize that he should have the majority of his net worth in it. And when he does have the majority of his net worth in it, he's going to go from, he's probably in pole position to be the world's first trillionaire, right? But he's going to go from not only being the world's first trillionaire to the world's first 100 trillionaire. If he understands it, you know, in the next few years. If he never understands it, somebody else will probably leapfrog him. And so like, yeah, I agree with Elon's mission, and I like what he's doing. I think he's very dumb on Bitcoin. I have no problem saying that. Every time I've ever heard him say anything about Bitcoin, it has been wrong. Um, so he'll get there eventually, I hope.
Calling all shadowy supercoders. I've got an event specifically for you. That's right. I am working with Pleb Lab to help out with Top Builder. Top Builder, it's like the Top Chef, but for shadowy supercoders. They've got a Bitcoin prize worth of $15,000 that you can earn when you showing off your skills. But not only that, you will gain valuable exposure, mentorship, and great collaboration opportunities. And a lot of people raised money last year, not just the winner. So you have the potential to show your stuff. All you got to do is sign up now. Between now and December 31st, go through 3 rounds where you are showing your skills, and then at the end, you will showcase your stuff at Startup Day down in Austin. So go ahead and sign up now and get everything started for Top Builder and showcase your stuff and help build in the Bitcoin ecosystem. All right, enough for me. Back to the show.
Then what do you make of like the new like Trump, how he's bringing in everybody, like kind of I guess business in a sense, like, you know, Vivek and Elon creating the Doge. It seems like he's kind of almost doing what he set out to do the first time around, whereas like kind of draining the swamp in a sense. How important do you think that is to, I guess, like as a part of the century-long or the 1,000-year-long dynasty for the U.S.?
Oh, it's incredibly important because, like I said, we've been astray for a long time. We've been asleep for a long time. We've been propagandized for a long time. We've been manipulated for a long time. We have had our civil liberties eroded, or, you know, outright denied for a long time. There's a quote from Henry Kissinger where he says, "The illegal we do right away. The unconstitutional takes a bit more time." Right? We've been led by people who have no respect for American norms, culture, values, rule of law, social mores, just none. And it's time to completely right the ship and, you know, get rid of these people and replace them with better parts who are able to do the job of governing effectively. And I think that, you know, most of Trump's appointment picks have been pretty good. Some of them are bad. Like the DEA pick is horrible. That guy's like a DEI wokester and he needs to go. But then there are guys like Kash Patel at FBI who, I mean, that's crazy. Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, amazing. Robert F. Kennedy as Health Secretary, amazing. Like, there are so many bullish indicators, you know, leading towards America's resurgence here. And I think that people that are fading America get it wrong. I think it's hard to understand America, by the way, if you don't live in America, because America is chaos incarnate, right? And in democracy, you have to be a player. You have to get involved in the game. And if you're not involved in the game, if you're not fighting for freedom every day here in America, you're not going to understand what it means to be an American or an American patriot or the core American ethos. When Trump won, I was I was actually moved, like deeply moved by it, because it shows that America will eventually do the right thing after doing all of the wrong things, right? America finally said in one unified voice, enough is enough. Enough of this bullshit. Enough of this woke shit. Enough of this COVID shit. Enough of this totalitarian shit. Enough of this corrupt shit. We want Donald Trump. Enough of this media brainwashing shit. We want Donald Trump, okay? Put him in. And that's a beautiful thing, man. The American people are unruly. And you can't, people often correlate the American people with the American government. They're entirely separate things. The United States government and the American people are at odds with each other. And that's the way it's supposed to be by design. The founders designed it that way, okay? Having a supreme distrust of the government is core to being a good American. So you don't have to sit around and go, I should think this way and that way because the television told me to. No, fuck that. Your job as an American is to be unwashed and unruly and distrustful and not do what the fuck you're told. That's what Americans do. So I'm very bullish on any people in the world who act like that. And right now, the only people I see doing it are Americans.
Yeah, and I mean, it seems like it's something where we're moving forward drastically. But on the flip side of things, do you think 4 years is enough time to do that, or do you think we're going to need to? Okay, so then how do you see it playing out, right? If Trump is able to become successful, do you think we're going to need, I don't know, maybe another like a Vivek or Ramaswamy, or even like JD Vance, depending on how he plays out in all this, like somebody else to kind of come in to continue this lineage and continue to, I guess, keep it going in the right path?
I think we need about 12 years to fully right the ship. And that would be Trump plus Vance for 2 terms. So as long as Vance looks like the next guy right now. Now we're in 2024. So if you watch this back in 2028 and you're like, Vance doesn't look like, a lot of shit could change between then and now. Politics is a messy business full of awful people. It's show business for ugly people. If you're pretty, you go to Hollywood. And if you're hideously ugly, you go to Washington, D.C. So listen, like JD Vance right now looks like the next guy up. He's in the on deck circle. I think he's incredibly intelligent. He's definitely the kind of guy we want. He's meritocratic in the sense that he came from, a broken home, raised by a drug addict mother, went to Yale, went to the Marine Corps, made something of himself, became a VC. He has more than 6.15 Bitcoin. I mean, the guy's a Chad. All right. I love this guy. So I hope that he's the next guy up. There's a partisan coalition that's formed around Trump, though. And I think there are a lot of players in this new MAGA movement. MAGA doesn't mean what it meant in 2016. It means something new now. And I think that it has broad bipartisan support from, if you look at just like Tulsi Gabbard, RFK, Elon Musk. I mean, these are all ex-Democrats, right? And they're now on the Republican side. It's almost like the parties have switched. Like the neocons are now Democrats, like the neocons we knew from like the early 2000s. That's what Democrats are now. They're war hawks. They're totalitarians. They're anti-speech. They're everything horrible in our society. And they need to be dealt crushing blow after crushing blow politically before they unfuck themselves and realize that the American people don't fuck with that shit. We don't like that shit. Get that shit the fuck away from us. Stop trying to tell us what to say or think or do. We don't fucking go in for that. That's not who we are as people. And until they figure that out, get rid of some of these delusions, they're not going to win any elections. And right now I'm seeing the left go apoplectic in terms of trying to figure out why they lost this election. And they lost it in a fucking landslide. They were dealt a crushing blow. There was an absolute mandate for Donald Trump. And the left is having pity parties where they say white men are racist, sexist, and that's why we lost. It's like, that shit doesn't work anymore, stupid. It doesn't fucking work. Haven't you been paying attention? Like, the country doesn't give a fuck about that, nor do they believe you. Nobody thinks that, like, they're the fucking, girl from the rich family who went to fucking MIT or Harvard, like, should have a prescription for their life. That's not how Americans think or act or behave. Like, nobody reads the New York Times. Nobody gives a fuck what you think. Get that through your head, or you're not going to win elections. And I would love to see a Democratic Party. It sounds like I'm a naked partisan Trump guy right now, but I would love to see a Democratic Party come back to sense and reason and, have pro-Bitcoin policies, have pro-free speech policies, be anti-war, Like those things would be absolutely fantastic. So let's try and make that happen, Democrats. Unfuck yourself. You're brainwashed. Unfuck yourself, please.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess on top of that note, like, how important do you think is like kind of like moving away from just the like? I mean, I think media played a big part of it, right? So it's almost like decentralizing a lot of these entities to kind of bring it back to the people. How important do you think, the media aspect and like almost like taking a lot of the influence away from the government with a lot of these ideologies? I guess in a sense played a role in this election.
Yeah, so we have a state-run media. That should be obvious to everybody. It is just full 100% propaganda. The crazy thing is it's like when something is dead, but its structure remains, we call that rotten. It's rotten. It's rotting, right? That's what's going on with legacy media. So it is dead. It already died. Nobody listens to it. Nobody watches it. Like more people are watching Joe Rogan and associated podcasts than they are watching Rachel Maddow, MSNBC, Fox News, whatever. It's a dead thing. It's old, but it still appears from a distance as if it's alive, right? And I think that's where people get confused here, is they think that the legacy media still matters, and it doesn't matter at all. Like its business model collapsed 25 years ago with the invention of the internet, and it's been dying slowly ever since. And so it's finally in its final death throes here. The state basically took it out and hollowed it out and made it its fuck puppet for a while, which was disgusting. We all had to live through that. And there was like these mass brainwashing campaigns, and like I don't know. You still talk to like your elderly, your boomer relatives who believe these things are true, but like unfortunately they're just fucked and they're in an awful information silo because the world shifted around them and they don't know how to work an iPhone or whatever because it's like made of glass and they like just press the buttons and they have no idea what's going on. So that's that's unfortunate for them, but the rest of us have to move forward and you do sense making in the real world. And when you're sense making in the real world, you can't trust a single media institution anymore. You can't even trust a coalition of media institutions. You're going to have to get better at thinking. And so you're going to have to vet information for yourself. You're going to have to learn to triangulate information between multiple competing sources. You're going to have to risk being wrong in public. You're going to have to be willing and flexible enough to change your mind in public and be embarrassed for having the wrong opinion. You're going to have to learn to get better at going to source to find information rather than getting the information pushed to you via a middleman. You're going to have to be more flexible in terms of, probabilistic thinking. So not just thinking in a black and white sense, like, is this true or is this not, but like assigning probabilities to things. Is this 70% likely to be true? Is it 99% likely to be true? Is it 5% likely to be true? And then you're going to have to resist Gelman's amnesia, which is this thing where you basically like, you read the newspaper about a subject that you're deeply involved in and you go, this is a bunch of bullshit. What the fuck? And then you flip the page and go, oh, I guess this is happening. No, none of it's happening. It's all fake. The whole newspaper is fake. Right. Yeah, you're just going to have to get everyone's going to have to get a lot better at thinking. And we're going to have to teach media literacy because we're in the information age. More information is created every second now than the entirety of human history leading up to the 1990s. I mean, just think about that. There was no information, like none. We were living in an information desert, and now we're living in an information ocean. And yeah, you're going to have a completely different view on how to sift through that, rather than just being like, well, I'm going to just find this one thing that says the truth, and then I'm just going to believe it. Like, no, that's stupid. You have to learn to get better at thinking.
Then, okay, so then what do you think, I guess, was like a bigger catalyst for, I guess, this push forward for it? What do you think is like the rise of social media, maybe Elon buying X? Like, how influential do you think like all of this like information age has been? Because, you can flip back to 2016, 2020, they were saying, that social media and before the Twitter files came out, it was all conspiratorial to think that these social media companies were, pushing towards one side. So do you think that age is over? and maybe it's being led because of Elon
No,
purchasing X and all that, or no?
no. So unfortunately, it's still not over. They still have control of the vast amount of social media companies.
Are you looking for a way to earn some free sats? Who isn't? Well, I've got the perfect way for you. It's an app called Yopaki. Besides having the absolute coolest name in the game, they've got an interactive card game called Loteria. Oh, look at that accent. I'm just hitting it, huh? That can teach you the history of Bitcoin and financial literacy. They've got amazing services and one of the slickest mobile wallets. Download it now using this link, and you can get 500 sats on the house on Green Candle, and then you can play Loteria every single day in order to potentially get some sats. All you got to do is match the cards, and it's an extremely fun and interactive way to learn more about Bitcoin. All right, enough for me. Let's get back to the show.
What happened is that we got a Fox News, and X is now the Fox News, right? Which is like giving you accurate information from the other side. And but we still have an entire media apparatus, social media apparatus that is full of fake bullshit that's being infiltrated by federal agents. So, like, I mean, Mark Andreessen was just on the Joe Rogan Experience talking about this, and he's the guy who funded Facebook early on. One of the people, he was one of their VC partners very early on, and like, he knows these things better than anybody because he's watched the social pressures be applied to Zuckerberg up close and personal. He's on the board of Facebook, and so if he's saying it, we've known it for years. I mean, I've known this information for 6 years, at least. It's nice that it's finally being exposed in the public, but yeah, I mean, there's heavy censorship on social media that is biased in a left fashion, and like people think that X is like hardcore right wing, and it's really just because the Overton window has shifted to include voices from both sides. Like when you have Blue Sky is now like the default liberal echo chamber, and Blue Sky just quashes all dissent from right wingers because they can't deal with it. If you go on Blue Sky and create an account and say there are two genders, they'll they'll ban your account, right? But on X, you can say whatever crazy leftist bullshit you want. You can talk about communism all day long, and you're never going to get banned because the right is more tolerant of free speech. The left is intolerant of free speech. And so, yeah, we're going to continue to live in this social media environment for a while. And I think decentralized social medias like Noster, like Blue Sky are the future. Not Blue Sky, though, because it's run by deranged leftist communists, but Noster is the future. And I would recommend everybody have an account there. It's still not like the go-to place for information, but it's like having a toehold in the future for when it's going to be needed, because these walled garden social medias are, I think, going away.
Yeah, I hear you on that. But part of I think the first time I heard an interview for you, it might have been all centered around, or maybe it was on Twitter where I saw you talking about getting to the 6.15 or 6.25 Bitcoin, and that was kind of like the rallying call that I think a lot of people got a lot of exposure to American Hodl. Now, with all that, with the price run up, you saying with the strategic Bitcoin reserve, do you still think that's I guess should be the rallying call, or do you think like over time this value should be shifted? Like, how do you see, like, what do you think to retire on Bitcoin? Like, what do you think is that number?
I mean, listen, the 6.15 is now like, somewhere north of $500,000, right? So like, I'm not going to tell the average person to go out and fucking get $500,000 and put. I don't think the average person has $500,000 liquid. I don't even know a lot of rich people that have $500,000 liquid cash, right? Like ready to deploy. That's rare. That's a rare thing. So no, it's certainly not the goal anymore. These stacking goals, they move, they shift. So like when I first joined Bitcoin, it was the 21 club, which meant at that time 21 Bitcoin. Later, the 21 club meaning shifted to mean 1 Bitcoin, because you were one of 21 million. But in the early days, it meant 21 Bitcoin. 21 Bitcoin is now $2 million. Okay, so like that club is not accessible for normal people. 6.15 was the next club, and at the time I started, it was about $30,000. So it was tough. It's hard to do. It's hard to accumulate $30,000, but still doable for the average middle class or middle to upper middle class person, right? There's a lot of $30,000 cars out here driving around on the road. So like you can get a $30,000 car, you can figure out how to get a $30,000, amount of Bitcoin was my thinking at the time. I think then it shifted down to 1 Bitcoin, and 1 Bitcoin was the goal. And that probably still is the goal. But even today, 1 Bitcoin is $100,000 almost. I mean, that is still a lot of money for the average person. I think that the new goal is probably something like 50 million sats, 20, 30, 40, 50 million sats, somewhere in there. Maybe 21 million sats. What is that in terms of dollar? That's like $20,000, something like that. Yeah, the new goal is denominated in sats. Being a sats deca millionaire is now the new goal, anywhere in the 8-figure sat range. So 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 million. That's the new goal. If you can get to 1 Bitcoin, fucking, you're doing great. You're doing great. But 1 Bitcoin's tough, man. 1 Bitcoin in the next year is going to be $250,000. Like that would be crazy to go out and tell people like, if you don't get $250,000, you're a bad person or something. Like, no, that's hard to do. It's hard as shit to do. I think I've run the math though. Like, if you're hearing these stacking goals and you're like, fuck, I missed it. I missed 21. I missed 615. I missed 1. Yeah, you're right. You did miss it. But you can still do the dollar cost averaging thing and just put away $10, $20 a day over long periods of time. And the Kager rate is still going to end up with you being worth millions of dollars. Like we ran the Kager calc right now. It's probably like whatever, like $20 a day ends up being, I've done this math before, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. It's probably something like $20 a day ends up being worth like $9 million or something in like 20 years. So that's really good, man. That's really good. Like you're still going to get to like half a Bitcoin or 1 Bitcoin. It's just going to happen slowly over time. So I think if you're late to Bitcoin or, you're here now, right? Like you should focus on doing what you can where you are with what you have available to you, and don't spend a single second kicking yourself about the past, about not being here earlier, because everyone who ever got to Bitcoin was late and they felt the same way you feel now and they had to get over it. I had to get over it. I should have been a 2011 Bitcoiner, and I didn't get into Bitcoin until 2014, the very end of basically 2015. So that was 4 years of fuck up on my part. And that amount of money, right? So like don't fret, because you can be late, you can fuck things up, and you can still win. Doesn't have to be perfect, just has to be good enough. If you buy as much Bitcoin as you can and 10, 20 years down the line you end up with half of it, you crushed it. You still crushed it. You did great, So yeah, do what you can where you are with what you have.
Yeah, and so it seems like Bitcoin's almost reaching this type of I guess escape velocity here. So with all of this game theory playing out, do you think that we're almost going to get towards the super cycle aspect of it, or because we're still in a fiat denominated world that we're going to like still kind of ride the waves, and there's obviously like opportunities here coming forward?
Yeah, so I think it's most likely, in my opinion, as a Bitcoiner, that we're going to go through a 4-year cycle where we're going to have a significant correction. I would love to believe in the moment in time where Bitcoin just jumps up the S curve, and I somewhat do believe in it, but like again, back to probabilistic thinking, I'm putting like a 10% probability on it and a 90% probability that we go through a 4-year cycle again. The problem here, though, is people hear that and they go, okay, well, 4-year cycle, well, I'm just going to trade it because we're going to know that it's going to collapse. But you don't know what the top is. So you might think you're trading it at 200K and it goes to 1 million and you lost out on 800,000, and it never goes back to 200K. It crashes out and falls to 300K, right? And you're down. Like that's going to be painful as fuck if you were trying to trade it to get more Bitcoin. If you were trading it to live do something that was meaningful to your life, or get married, pay for a wedding, have a child, whatever, then you won't regret it. But if you're doing it just to trade it and you fuck it up, you're going to regret it big time. So yeah, man, I mean, I think the strategic Bitcoin reserve has a lot to do with whether or not it's a true super cycle, If the nation states start stacking, how much they start stacking, how hard the competition is between the nation states. That has a lot to do with whether this is a super cycle or not. So like if we get the SBR, I would put the odds of a super cycle at like 60%, maybe 70%. If we don't get an SBR, I would put the odds at like 5 to 10%. You know?
Gotcha. Well, you've been very generous with your time, so I appreciate you coming on the show. Why don't you tell everybody where they could find you, and if you got anything else going on?
Cool, man. Yeah, no, I'm on Twitter. I'm on Noster. I just pop up on podcasts like this one from time to time. I'm usually around at the Bitcoin conferences. I like to, just hang out, talk to other Bitcoiners and shit. So if you see me at a conference, just say hi. And other than that, I'm not trying to sell you anything. So I don't really give a fuck if you follow me or not. It's Brandon. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much. And yeah, I'll put all that in the show notes. Definitely recommend following his feed for some great commentary on what's going on in the Bitcoin space. So Hodl, thanks so much, man.
Of course, dude. Happy to be here.
Thank you for tuning in to the latest episode of the State of Bitcoin podcast. If you really enjoyed this one, I've got another one cooking up for you. You can click that right here and you can go to the next episode, which is an absolute banger where I'm bringing you only the latest and greatest guests. Or if you're looking for more macro related content, you could check out my other channel, Macro Insights Pod. I got it linked for you right here. So where I'm bringing you more about stocks, real estate, traditional finance stuff. So go ahead and check that out. And if you enjoyed this podcast, go ahead and hit that like, hit that subscribe button, and tell a friend to tell a friend. All right, enough from me. I'll see you at the next one.